Hey guys, welcome back to week 8 of distance learning. Today we're going to do a review and we're going to start with decimals and place value. So this is the place value chart that we talked about early in the beginning of the year. So you can see from the decimal point all the way to left side, we have all the way from ones to billions. And these are numbers that you're pretty familiar with that you've seen before in other grades. The ones that maybe you hadn't seen as much are the decimal numbers, which are on the right side of the decimal point. So a decimal point, what it actually means is it's separating whole numbers from numbers that are less than one whole. So when you think about a quarter or 50 cents, any number that is less than one whole is considered a decimal number. So we see here we have a few different categories, but the first place value after the decimal is tenths place. So that means basically you're saying 1 out of 10. Hundredths place is 1 out of 100. So if you had a 1 here, this would mean 1 out of 100. If you had a 1 here, this would mean 10 out of 100 or 1 out of 10. If you had the thousandths place, and you had a 1 in here, you'd have 1 out of 1,000, and so forth. It goes 10 thousandths. So remember, these ones end in this noise with the THS rather than just the S for the whole numbers. So in terms of place value, when we think about comparing decimal numbers, we often find ourselves comparing just the place value. So if I have the number 2.76, so $2.76, for instance, and then someone else has $2.80. Even if I didn't put the zero there, I'm really comparing the place value. So my ones are the same, but my tenths, the 8 is bigger, so this one automatically is bigger. So even if it didn't have this extra trailing zero, we just compare the place value. So if we're comparing 5.67 to 7.32, well, again, we're just looking, the ones place, it automatically shows us that the 7 is bigger. So we don't need to do any other comparison. We know this one is bigger. So the same goes for decimal numbers. So if you have the same whole number, but your decimals are different, so the number 9 by itself looks smaller than 703, but this really doesn't mean 9 by itself. It really means 9 out of 10. If we had trailing zeros, 9 out of 10 is the same thing as 90 out of 100, which is the same thing as 900 out of 1,000. So the thousandths place. So if we compare them, sometimes you can put the zeros to adequately compare, but oftentimes you can just look at the place value. So we know that the 9 is bigger, so that means that 5.9 is bigger than 5.703. So adding and subtracting decimals. So the biggest thing to remember here is that whenever we're adding or subtracting, we want to make sure the decimal point lines up. It also means that the place values are lining up as well. That's really important whenever we add and subtract. Let's say we had 23 and we wanted to add 5. If we added it like this and we added 3 and then we added 7, this would show that 23 plus 5 is 73, which is definitely not correct because we didn't put the 5 in the correct place value. The 5 should have been in the ones place. So we set this up as 23 plus 5. Again, the ones place gets added, so we get 8 and then 2 plus nothing. So the answer is 28. It's the same thing for whether you have a decimal. So let's say we had 5.34 and we were adding 2.7. Again, if I put my 2.7 like this means my tenths place is being added to my hundredths place. They're not the same place value. They need to be in the same place value. So that's often why we line them up based on the decimal, because that shows us exactly where the place values are. So again, we're going to put our 2.7 right here, and we can see that there's no number in the spot. So you can leave it as no number, or you can put a 0 because that represents the same thing. So if we were adding this, again, we make sure the decimals line up, and the decimal lines up in the answer as well. So we have 4 plus 0, we have 3 plus 7, And then we have 1 plus 5 plus 2. So now we have 8.04. It's the same thing if we're subtracting. Again, we just want to make sure that the decimal point lines up. And then you subtract like you normally would with any sort of whole number, fractions. So what does a fraction actually mean? So a fraction is actually the result of division. And so let's look at what that means. Let's say you had a piece of cake. Let's say you had one piece of cake and you divided it by 4 people. Each person, again, is going to get 1/4. So again, the result of a division is a fraction. If we try this with another set of numbers, let's say you had 2 pieces of cake and you wanted to split it up into thirds or by 3 people. So 2 pieces of cake and you wanted to share it with 3 people. Let's say these are the thirds, these are the thirds. So each of these is 1/3. Each person, again, remember there's 3 people. Each person, so person A gets 1/3 from here, 1/3 from here. Person B gets 1/3 from here, 1/3 from here. And person C gets 1/3 from here, 1/3 from here. So you can see that each person gets 1/3 plus 1/3, which is 2/3. So again, we had 2 pieces of cake and we divided it by 3 people, which got us 2/3. So again, if you see, we just use our dividend and our divisor, which we'll get to in a few slides, but really when we say 2 divided by 3, that really means the fraction 2/3. So a fraction is a result of a division.